I'll know we're successful if people aren't talking about what's happening at Penn or what's happening at Einstein or what's happening at Jefferson or Temple. When people are talking about what's happening in Philadelphia.
Hi, I'm Danielle DeLeo Kim, Executive Director of Philadelphia 250. In 2026, the country will commemorate the 250th anniversary of American independence. So I invite you to listen in and get inspired to take action as Philadelphia 250 brings together thought leaders and change makers to share what those founding promises mean to them now and in the pursuit to 2026.
Hi, I'm John George. I'm the healthcare reporter with the Philadelphia Business Journal, and I'm here with Dr. Stephen Klasko and Dixie and James.
I'm Steve Klasko. I'm the president and CEO of Thomas Jefferson University and Jefferson Health. I'm also a distinguished fellow of the World Economic Forum. And Jefferson is a very large healthcare organization in southeastern Pennsylvania and South New Jersey. We're the second largest employer in Philadelphia. And we have a very interesting three-campus university with a health science campus in downtown Philadelphia, a design and fashion campus in East Falls, and an Italian campus with the only medical school in the country that in the world where you can practice in the United States or the European Union. Our 14 hospitals really span the geographic sphere of the greater southeastern Pennsylvania and New Jersey area. And we're very proud of a model that we call healthcare with no address, of how do we get care out to where people are. We feel we can be a participant in the digital revolution, even though we're a hospital company. And we're looking forward to our 250th anniversary being one in which Philadelphia is leading the world in really moving healthcare into the future.
Hi, my name is Dixie James, and I am the President and Chief Operating Officer for Einstein Medical Center Philadelphia, Elkins Park, Moss Rehab, and Center One, and Willow Crest. And the Einstein Healthcare Network is about a $1.2 billion nonprofit healthcare system. We have 3 acute care hospitals. Our flagship academic medical center is Einstein Philadelphia downtown, and we also have a brand new state-of-the-art hospital out in Montgomery County. And we also have the world-renowned Moss Rehab facility, which is an independent rehab, and a 5-star rated Willow Crest, our skilled nursing facility, and 3 actually physician companies, so about 550 employed physicians and over 400 residents and fellows and over 30 academic teaching programs. So we are a teaching hospital, independent academic affiliated with Thomas Jefferson Medical School and longtime affiliates. And we have a mission at Einstein to with compassion and brilliance to and have humility and honor and serve as many as we can. And that is the foundation of everything that we've done. It's what we were founded on. And we continue to serve in all the ways that we can.
Well, thanks, Dixie. What motivated you to spend your career working in the healthcare industry?
Well, I think from the very beginning, when I thought about healthcare, I wanted to be a physician. I wanted to serve, and I wanted to do something that impacted lives. And so I started my career actually my college career as a biology major. And I think I quickly learned that I was maybe a bit too squeamish for direct patient care, but I found a way through health administration to still give back to the field. And I think that I'm fortunate and privileged in the way that I'm able to serve. And even though I'm not frontline clinical care, that I can impact clinical programs and I can still impact communities and make sure that life-changing care is being delivered.
And Steve, why did you want to be a doctor? And then why, after deciding you wanted to be a doctor, did you want to get inside of turn over to the administrative side of things?
Well, first of all, just let me say that the reason Dixie went into healthcare is exactly what makes us so excited about being partners with Einstein, because we share very similar missions of improving lives. So Einstein and Jefferson are natural partners. I realized, just as Dixie realized at some point, that I could actually do more by actually running a system, and I've had the opportunity to run 3 or 4 large systems at Drexel, at University of South Florida, now at Jefferson, and really creating that mentality of healthcare with no address, of improving lives, and of reimagining education and discovery to create value.
Let's talk about the pandemic. We're now, 6 months into the COVID-19 outbreak, and I hear the phrase public health talked about more than I can ever remember happening. So the big question is Philadelphia and the region's public health system doing a good job with this crisis? And let's start with you, Steve.
Yes and no. I think that generally the state and the city were in sync, which is not true in many states and cities. So I have to congratulate the governor and the mayor. Certainly the governor was talking to people like Dixie and I on an ongoing basis, as was the Secretary of Health. I think the no would be, what happened in the United States is a bit of a travesty, and we weren't immune to it. At the same time that the American hospital systems were losing somewhere around $500 billion, the American insurance industry was having their best years ever. I think that while we did well in the pandemic, and places like Einstein and Jefferson did everything they needed to do and had a financial tsunami because of it, we're sort of a victim of the fragmented, expensive, and inequitable healthcare system in the country. And the other thing I'll say is that it really, really exemplified the healthcare disparities. The fact that African-American patients died at a rate 3 or 4 times what you'd expect from their demographic was not because they were genetically more susceptible to RNA encapsulated viruses. It was because of the food, education, housing, access. It was because of where initially some of the testing was, et cetera.
And Dixie, you look like you're chomping at the bit to add to that.
Well, I mean, I just echo a lot of what Steve says. I mean, Einstein, sitting where we sit, we were at the epicenter of that surge. Our community was disproportionately impacted by COVID-19. And I know firsthand what that looks like. And we experienced that. And so I feel very personal and passionate about the fact that we do have to do something to address social determinants of health, whether it's for the second wave of COVID-19 or COVID-24 or whatever else is coming down the pike. We have to create an infrastructure and a system that provides more equitable care to everyone. And so, with over 3,000 COVID patients in our network, that was a heavy burden. And so I think back to your question about, how did we do? I think the individual institutions did good. I think we did the best we can. We partnered with the state and the city, but there's room for improvement. And if we're going to face whatever's coming down the pike, we've got to take the lessons learned and do better.
Could I just add one thing? I think that, I really want to emphasize what I think is going to be a renaissance, if we allow it, of a digital transformation in healthcare. The example I give you is banking. 30 years ago, Dixie, and maybe John, you're too young, but 30 years ago, we would have been talking during the pandemic of people lining up on Fridays to deposit their checks, and we had to stagger it. Well, that wasn't a problem. And we don't get up in the morning and say, I think I'm going to telebank, get all excited about telehealth. It's just that banking went from 90% of the bank to 90% at home. I believe by the pandemic of 2030, that healthcare will be just like that. And hopefully, again, Philadelphia will be an epicenter of something good that way, as opposed to what Dixie talked about.
The theme of this discussion is sparking revolutionary action. What does that mean to each of you? What does it take for an action or an idea to be revolutionary? And why don't I start with Steve?
Well, John, as you know, I'm a very calm guy, and I believe in the status quo, so I don't believe in any of this revolution stuff. But I would actually, I think if we go back to the American Revolution, think about what had to happen. It wasn't comfortable. It really was looking at what's going to be important for the next generation, so they don't have to go through this. But it's going to really be tough on us. We need a healthcare revolution and a healthcare disruption. And as you know, John, I've spent a lot of time talking about there's no such thing as non-disruptive disruption. And I think the failure in healthcare policy and what has to change by our 250th anniversary, the failure in healthcare policy is we've just been figuring out ways to pay for this fragmented, expensive, and inequitable system without doing the hard things to transform the system. I think the issue is Philadelphia has to either decide or not to have a revolution. And the revolution would be allowing places like Einstein and Jefferson to get together to take care of the poorest folks, really sort of trying to solve the non-strategically aligned insurer-provider type situation that we have, figuring out ways to get supplies at a lower cost than they are now, figuring out end-of-life issues and increasing things like palliative care, making education less costly, dealing with the social determinants of food, education, and housing, and then going and saying, you know what, we started this revolution in 2021, and now here we are at the 250th anniversary of America's revolution, and we are America's healthiest hometown.
So, Dixie, how does Einstein plan for the future in a world where this may or may not happen, this ability to join the Jefferson system?
Yeah, that's a good question. So for us, partnerships with Jefferson allowed us to do the additional things we need to improve health for the community, and to as healthcare expands, there's technology, there's all sorts of things we need to keep care equitable for that population that without the dollars from the payers, we simply can't afford to do. And so when we think about what do we do without a merger, it becomes how invested is the state and the city in helping us provide care for their underserved. We believe we have a solution in our partnership with Einstein. Jefferson. Absent of that, we're going to have to look for a partnership at the state and local levels.
So let's imagine it's 2026. Dixie, what are your hopes for the city and the country? What do you hope things are like 5 years out from now?
Steve was describing a future that I thought sounded pretty great. He was a little bit further out than 5 years from now, but I certainly hope we're well on our way to getting there. I would love to see Philadelphia be a leader. We have all of the things we need. We're the sixth largest city. We have a ton of resources in our eds and our meds and technology. We have growth. We have great people. We have a great city. And I'd like to see us be a leader in driving change around healthcare outcomes and health equity. I'd like to see us have a model that reduces the gap in life expectancy, and so that you're not looking at the haves and have-nots, and your ability to have more years with your family isn't determined by what zip code you're born and live in. I think that's not freedom. That's not liberty. That's not what we founded this country, and what was the Revolutionary Act that happened in Philadelphia was not about any of that. So if the country needs leadership out of that, I think it would be wonderful to see Philadelphia laying the groundwork with measurable outcomes and targets on what does it mean to be successful in changing the tide and creating a real equitable system for all Philadelphians.
And Steve, you talked about 2030. Why can't some of the things you talked about happen sooner? What are your hopes for 2026?
Look, I think what I would hope is that we'd get over ourselves and we'd look in the mirror and say, this is what we are today. I think Philadelphia has to stop talking about being the Silicon Valley of healthcare. Stop talking about meds and eds. The great thing about the American Revolution is that the states didn't always get along when they were competing, but when they decided what they wanted the country to be, they got along. Massachusetts and Pennsylvania and Virginia, we have to have the same kind of thing. So I'm hoping that we can be that what we look at is exactly what happened in the American Revolution. That the insurers in Philadelphia, the health systems in Philadelphia, the universities in Philadelphia get together and have the Philadelphia experiment. I'll know we're successful if people aren't talking about what's happening at Penn or what's happening at Einstein or what's happening at Jefferson or Temple. When people are talking about what's happening in Philadelphia.
Steve, on something was so important. I do think that we operate to be successful. We have to move out of these silos. We operate with our heads down, and healthcare, solving the issues for healthcare inequity isn't just a health system problem to solve, right? Everyone needs to be committed and working together and using our resources and rowing in the same direction. And part of what we haven't done well is to leverage those relationships. And I agree with Steve, and I don't know that we can get there until we get past our sort of this is my terrain and you stay over there. We really have to decide that we're going to hold hands and do this differently. I will tell you, sort of piggybacking a little bit on what we talked about as it relates to partnerships, one of the things I learned about and doing things together is that when I look back at everything that has happened over the last 6 months, it was an interesting time to step newly into the operating role as president and chief operating officer for Einstein Philadelphia, given everything that happened. But when I look back on it, I see incredible resilience, and I see people who, when they're working together with a common goal, that what would have seemed insurmountable becomes absolutely attainable, right? We look back and we're like, how do we do that? How did we coordinate? There was no roadmap, there was no blueprint. You got it done because we had a common goal, and we all knew how important it was, and we agreed on it. And it wasn't the infighting, it was we're in this together. And I think that is a valuable lesson to prove the ability we have within ourselves and within our city, if we take that attitude the next step and say, what are we doing together, and how much, and Steve's right, we can accomplish so much together in the next 5 years or 6 years if we just commit to not fighting and to doing things together with a shared enthusiasm and effort. I don't think there's anything we can't accomplish, quite honestly.
And I would add, John, that I think Dixie's right, that what we learned is if you really stick to your values and your mission, then no matter what happens, you can be resilient and get through it. So our mission is we improve lives, and our values are do the right thing, put people first, and be bold and think different. And we needed all of that. We woke up every morning and had like a 7 a.m. meeting and saying, what are we doing to do the right thing? What are we doing to put people first? What are we doing to be bold and think different? What are we doing to improve lives?
So I wanted to throw one last question out to both of you, and that is, are there revolutionary actions that all of us can be taking to make ourselves and the city and our country a better and healthier place? And let me start with Steve.
Well, first of all, demand more from healthcare. And look at everything else in your consumer life. I mentioned banking or retail, and say, why can't I do it in healthcare? And don't have the excuse that healthcare is different. So if your insurer is sending you a 37-page bill that you don't understand, then say that's not acceptable. If your provider is saying, I can see you in 6 weeks, you need to be seen the next day, either go to another provider or say that's not acceptable. Ask questions like why you don't have some of the same digital benefits that you have in your other consumer life. Because what that'll start to do, John, is to force all of us into that kind of thing. Consumers in healthcare have been a little bit lazy in just accepting the fact that we say this is how it is, that they don't accept it anything else. I hope 5 years from now, when we have the 250th anniversary and people say, where's Jefferson? Nobody can define it. I mean, Jefferson on my phone, or Jefferson that's emblazoned on my healthcare wearable or my Aura ring, or Jefferson in 12 micro hospitals, or Jefferson over at Einstein or Moss. Oh, you mean the place where really, really, really sick people go to get transplants? I think that might still be a 10th and Walnut. That's the healthcare that people deserve. That's how I want to be defined, that we're defined by the care and caring we give, not by our locations or our place where we take care of the sickest people.
And Dixie, same question.
So this is going to sound like it shouldn't be revolutionary, but given the rates of registration, it is. And I would say what can be done is to take your civic duty very seriously. And that relates to census response and voting, right? Our elected officials influence and impact our ability to make all the changes that we're talking about today. And since the pandemic has hit, I know that registration has been down voter registration about 70%, particularly in some of the communities we serve. And so those are very hard fought rights that came on the heels of revolutions. And so I think it's important that we, that everyone take that act seriously, take their civic duty seriously, and go to the polls. And this is not about who you vote for. It's the fact that you need to vote and be heard and help to drive the change you want to see.
Well, great. Well, thank you both so much for this this great discussion. That's all the time we have. This is John George for Philadelphia 250. Thanks.